We have given literally thousands of presentations, and especially for athletes. Presentations to groups of 5, 6, 7 people, as well as to thousands of people in auditoriums, schools all over the country, and kids of all ages and adults of all ages. One of the stories that we have probably shared the most at these presentations has nothing to do with sports. It's an image that it's difficult to look at, the story is difficult to hear, but it drives home a major point of our program, and that is that we need to not only have our eyes up, but that we need to be willing to do the work. And that word work is important. It's difficult. This story right here is something that some of you may be familiar with. This was on the cover of the Time magazine back in the early 90s. It's a story of a young girl in the Sudan during a major drought and famine. And she was suffering, she was struggling to make her way to an aid station that had been set up by the Red Cross for her to go and get some help. You notice she doesn't have a coach, she doesn't have a mom or dad or an older brother or sister that's helping her make her way to this aid station. But there's this vulture that's following behind her, and she's obviously weak and struggling. The photographer who took this picture did so with the hope of bringing attention to this problem, this famine, and this disease that was taking life in the Sudan, so that people across the world could hopefully get involved and help. Now, this was before the internet. So these pictures were brought back to America and to Europe, and they were put in newspapers and magazines, and it was successful. Millions of dollars of aid came in to help these people who were struggling. But when the photographer took this picture, he was asked about it later. He actually won the Pulitzer Prize Award for this picture. He was asked about the famine and what he saw. And he talked about this field being full of people who were struggling. It wasn't just this girl, but this particular picture, as he turned around, he saw her and he saw that vulture and he took that picture. And he said that afterwards he went over and he sat in the bushes. Maybe those bushes back behind there. But he said he sat in the bushes, he sat down, looked out at what he had been seeing, and he just felt miserable. So much so that he said he thought of his daughter at home, he prayed to God, and he cried. He just couldn't believe what he had seen and that he had to cover it. Horrible situation for not only the people there, but I felt bad for him and that his job required him to have to go and do that. And he was told not to intervene. Now, this is where the story kind of takes a turn. He was told not to intervene. He was told to take pictures, to bring it back, and that it, by doing so, would bring attention to the problem and hopefully help it. So he didn't intervene. And some people who interviewed him after he got back asked him what happened to the little girl. Did the vulture get to her? What happened? He said he watched her struggle, that she would move forward a little bit and then stop and rest. He did say he tried to scare away the vulture, that it did fly away, but he didn't know if it came back. I would assume it did. And he didn't know if the girl made it. He didn't make sure that she made it to the aid station. He left. A lot of people got upset at that. They didn't understand why he didn't make sure that she made it, why he didn't pick her up and take her to the aid station and make sure she got the food and water that she needed. And some people were outraged about that. And he took a lot of heat for the fact that he didn't do more to help her. Now, again, I started that off by explaining that he was told not to intervene for multiple reasons. And as I mentioned earlier, she wasn't the only person that were there. So when I've given this presentation to people, I've asked them, would you have helped? If you were in this same situation, would you have picked her up and taken her to the aid station? Raise your hand if you would have done that. And every time I ask that question, almost 100% of the hands will go up in the room. And I don't know, the first probably several hundred times I shared this, would say, so would I. I would have been the one that would have picked her up and taken her to the aid station. The truth is, how can I or anybody else say we would have done that when in the same day that I might answer yes to that question, I won't talk to somebody in the grocery line with me at the store because they're a little different than me. Or I won't go out of my way to help somebody that I see struggling at the grocery store on the side of the road, or a neighbor that needs help or something because I don't know them, or because they believe in something differently than me. They're of a different political party or a different religion or something. We have all these reasons that we justify, yes, I would help, but we won't do the simple thing. So I changed my thought on that. I don't know that I would. I'd like to think I would help her, but I don't know if I was in that moment if I really would. because I struggle to do much more that's very simple. And our message of living with your eyes up and doing the work is very simple. Not everybody in the world is starving from things like food and water. Truth is, and most of the people listening to this, and especially if you live in America, we don't have this in the hallways of our schools, this setting. Yes, there's poverty, and yes, there are people who are starving. But to the extent that she is at lunchtime down the hallways of an elementary school or a junior high school, or in front of the McDonald's or the Wendy's or whatever, we don't see this. And we should be extremely happy and grateful for that. However, there are people starving, and there are people in our communities who are also starving, not for food and water. They're starving for attention. They're starving for friendship. They're starving for recognition. They're starving for somebody to say they appreciate them, just to be noticed. There are kids in our community every day that go to school that are starving for somebody to say hello to them, to smile to them, to compliment them, to just be friends with them, to ask them what they're doing or what they did last weekend. Would they like to hang out? What's their hobby? Just to be friendly. And they're starving for that. We need to pick them up. We need to make sure that we don't let the vultures get to them and that we don't just shoo away the vulture. That's not doing the work. That's the easy part. Helping the person make it, picking them up and taking them to the aid station is going to require us stepping out of our comfort zone, doing something that's truly difficult and hard. And especially for athletes, we believe that athletes know how to do hard things, that you've been pushed and pressed to do hard things your whole life. But that if you'll look outside of yourself and realize how much you've really been given, how many opportunities you've had to do what you love, and how many people have sacrificed so you can do what you love, that maybe you'll go to school or go to practice or be in the community and be a little bit more aware of those people who are starving for those things, because it might be a teammate on your team. It might be a coach that needs you to tell your coach how much you appreciate he or her for all they've done for you. So this idea of living with your eyes up and doing the work is lift, give back, take, and help people. Don't just be a bystander that watches and hopes that the problem goes away because you feel bad or because you shoo away the vulture, because the problem will come back. We need real action-oriented, intentional effort to do the work to help people who are struggling. And that's what we're asking you athletes to do. Have your eyes up and do the work.